Yeah. I mean, the same buffer trick should work. And the index part should still be okay. And we're calling them buffers, so actually everything should check out. The only thing that won't work is this mdata stuff. This is now buffer, and that's it, I believe. And the data size is now unknown, but I mean, you can compute the data size. But now there's what I consider a little bit more useful. So you have this long computation. There is number of channels, but there's also what was it called? Number of frames or something? Ooh, I'm starting to really lose my focus. Where is it defined? It's defined in filter audio mixer.h. Right here. So num frames and channels. What I want is num frames for this call. Yeah, and that's all I need. And this stuff should work because inbuff is already the essence 16. Let's just check, search for buffers, see if there's anywhere else. Yeah, amazingly we're okay. So that should do the right thing, and note that it's independent of the, doesn't matter if the size of the input buffer doesn't match the output buffer, it'll do the right thing. And right now I'm doing the sleepy face, rubbing my eyes, but I'm not done yet, so I'm taking off the, what do you call it, the cardigan like thing, and getting serious. So we have init with entity, which is going to be used. The only thing we have to replace now is the voice entity call, and we will need another class called filter filter entity. No, I'm going to call it output entity. Yeah, I'll call it output entity. An output entity can also be used as input entity, but it means that something in our system has processed it. So it's probably in our native format. This is in contrast to something like the mic, which we've taken some format like from Apple's Audio I/O or from a file, and we use whatever the codec decodes to some structure. Anyway, in the future might be good to convert more things to our buffer format. Okay. So I'm creating a new entity, and that's just output entity. So let's go to the Mac. That should not be, that's just a regular class. And that's just called output entity. I could call it sound output entity. I call it filter output entity, but that's ambiguous again. I'm trying to save filter for the more basic or core components. so output entity, and that should be a subclass of filter entity. Yeah. And yes. First thing I'm going to do is change it to mm. So the number of classes are starting to pick up, and we've got the structure starting to work itself out. Okay, so I'm going to put filter buffer sound on hold, and we're now just going to do the same. You know what? I'm just going to go crazy and replace voice entity prematurely with output entity. And how many times does voice entity happen? Not much. Yeah, so in fact, there's not a lot to worry about here. So, yeah, I'm gonna show our to-do list, because now I realize that I'm just jumping towards all of these. I'm just implementing all of these things instead of the next step, which was to avoid doing any of the implementation and have a mid-level, a midway point, a checkpoint to just play back the sound immediately. But that ends up being a little counterproductive, and I can live without having the feedback. Okay, so see, we're now just talking about new sound class. We did that. And the new voice object. Yeah. And this is going to be the tricky part, actually. So let's, how to override should be removed. Okay, so now let's copy our stuff. One's called voice entity, and one is called output entity. So it's also going to have its buffers, except they're going to be our buffers. Like so. And we're going to take the same stuff. I'm going to get rid of this for now. And that's just the texture call, which is actually pretty long. And I'm going to use our default. Now we have a default that we've implemented. So I have to remember to do that. I'll just write to do. And the first one is texture. Texture default. Okay. The other thing is that we no longer have input buffers, we have filter buffers. Yeah, like that. And note that, yeah, this looks like this can be used incrementally like we were talking about before, and that's great. We can call this repeatedly. And the sounds, yeah, we'll have to work on that. That's in the should be deleted or should be removed call. So this looks okay. Now let's hop on over to the implementation files. Oops, this is so I have to set Objective-C mode to get the pretty colors to show up. Okay, so first I'll copy library files. The library includes not too much going on here. I'm going to say instead of input buffer sound, we now need our fancy new filter buffer sound. And it has almost the same interface. And the nice thing about that is we can just copy and paste all this code and it should work. Like that. And that. So when my here is what was it again? Do I have to do this stuff? I think this is all very general too, and I don't need to write this. I could just use the default. But I don't know if there's a default in, well, I don't need this window anymore, so I'm going to look it up. Gen texture width, and there's no draw self. We can just put a draw self here that does the default, because it kind of sucks to keep doing this for when I don't have a clue. Yeah. So we'll put the draw self there. So now every class has an implementation of draw self. I will need to modify this part to the, I think it's GL text, and this is filter entity. I wonder if I can somehow have this be polymorphic and get whatever the pointer is. So if I'm an output entity and I happen to have gen texture with width or height defined, it would automatically look up that one. Otherwise, use the default. Yeah, I mean, but if you look at this function, why did it say text? That's texture. Yeah. Looks like there's a little bit of randomness to this. Yeah, that's right. And that's fine. That's the animation. But there's nothing in it that's specific. So we can use this for now and see what happens. In any case, I don't need to worry about that in output entity, and that's great. I'm just going to get rid of that stuff. I know might be some issues. I saw the word noise buff. Okay, that's okay. Alright, so now look how compact this class is. Because of the beauty of Objective-C, we don't have to replace anything here. Like if we copy constructors in C++. There's no name scope.